Hello and welcome to the Daily Brew, the devotional where every day we try a new brew and see what God is brewing for us in the Bible. Yes, it's cheesy, but it's true. And it is tea week. It is day 136. And we're going to be trying a very delicious brew very soon. But first, congratulations is in order because we finished another book of the Bible. Judges is done. Well done. And before we get into the brew, let's read out the scriptures for today. You can also find them in the description on whatever platform you're listening or watching from. Today we're going to be looking at Proverbs 12, verse 8 to 17, John 9, verse 1 to 34, and Ruth, chapters 1 and 2. But I do want to try this brew today because it is smelling divine. My goodness. It is tea order. I assume that's how you say it, tea order. Like a bit of a takeoff of kia ora, which in New Zealand we say to say hello. It is green tea with peach, passion fruit, and New Zealand kawa, which just sounds and smells unbelievable. It's also got one of those bougie little bags that feel like it's not made of kind of like a cheap paper, but looks like fabric. Smells good, looks good. I'm really hoping it tastes good. I'm wondering if there's anything else. Oh, read this on the back. Our delicious green tea is perfectly complemented by the sweet juiciness of peach and passion fruit and the subtle, fresh flavor of kawa. Now, unlike Harry, I don't have a very developed palate. I can definitely smell the passion fruit and peach. I'm not convinced I'm going to be able to taste the kawa. In all honesty, I don't even know what kawa tastes like. But let's give it a go. I've got my tea bag in. I'm ready to go. Smells amazing. Let's see what it tastes like. Okay. All right. Okay. This is a little bit disappointing, I'm going to be honest, because the smell is that of passion fruit and peach, which is just two of the most delicious flavors ever. But the taste is a lot more green tea than anything else. And maybe a little bit of kawa, if we know what kawa tastes like. It's the sweetness and smell, but the kind of harshness and taste. I'm a little bit disappointed about this tea, to be honest. I was quite looking forward to it. I think Harry gave it a go a wee while ago, and it was a long time ago, and I can't remember what he said about it. But I'm a little bit disappointed. It definitely smells better than it tastes. If you're wanting to make your room smell lovely, pour a tea, but you'll have to give the taste a go at your own peril because I'm not so sure about it. I'm not sure if I'll finish that one. But as Harry said, enough of the brew. Let's get into the Bible. I grew up in a Christian home, going to church every Sunday without fail kind of Christian home, which I think is the best kind of Christian home. I loved Jesus as soon as I could speak. I'd tell strangers about Jesus when I was praying on the beach. I invited Jesus into my heart when I was 4 years old, and I've never strayed from that decision, which I think is pretty awesome, by the way. In my teenage years, though, I was so passionate about Jesus, but I was also disappointed with my own testimony. I'd heard many preachers by then share their stories of being far away from God, on drugs, living in a terrible way, and finding Jesus, and their lives were turned around. And there is so much power in a testimony like this. And I felt like I didn't have one. I didn't really remember my pre-Jesus life. I was praying to God, wondering if I'd be effective at all for his kingdom without a story. And he spoke to me. He reminded me that first I did have a story, but that my story, knowing him for myself at a very early age, was his original design. It was his best plan for humanity. He reminded me that many Bible heroes made a great impact without a I woke up hungover in a ditch kind of story. My story is one of the faithfulness of God, of his protection, his guidance, his presence, and his consistency throughout my life. My story matters. And I'm here to tell you today, you're listening in today, for me to say that I don't know your story, but your story matters. And we see this in our scriptures today. In Proverbs, we read a whole bunch of Proverbs covering a whole bunch of things like being prudent, caring for animals, listening to advice. But the last verse we read today in Proverbs says this: an honest witness tells the truth, but a false witness tells lies. Now, this scripture can be considered in the context of what happens in a courtroom, being a witness, but it's not limited to that. All of us are witnesses. The Bible talks a lot about this, meaning that we are in a position to share about the testimony of Jesus. We are witnesses to his story. We are witnesses to his goodness. We are witnesses to his work in our lives. And we can tell our story. A good witness tells the truth. And man, I love what our blind man does when his sight is restored in the book of John today. There's opposition and contention around his story, which that's got to be tough. They were asking, was the man who was healed even this guy? What do his parents have to say? How could this happen on the Sabbath? Is Jesus a sinner? How did he heal? Is this legit? There's questions swirling around. The man is hauled up in front of the religious leaders to answer for all of this. And his response is brilliant, one that we can take note of. It says in John 9:25, he replied, this is the blind man who was healed, whether he is a sinner or not, it's about Jesus, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. See, our blind man who was healed didn't have all the answers, but he had his story. And as people of God, it's important that we dig deep and learn more and discover more of the mystery of God. But we aren't required to have all the answers. That's where faith kicks in. And sometimes the best answer we can give is to say, I don't know. But what I do know is what I've seen. What I do know is what I've read. And what I do know is what I've experienced. What I can tell you is my story. And as we enter the book of Ruth today, we see the story of one family. Ruth was the story told in the context of the Judges. So you've just read about the people of God in the book of Judges, and Ruth happened at the same time that these stories were being told. Nikki Gumbel says about Judges and Ruth, while the context of the two books is identical, the content of the two books is very different. In the big picture of the book of Judges, big picture, whole nation, it's the story of a whole nation. Ruth follows the story of one family, two insignificant women, their story. And this shows Ruth's story matters to God. And for Ruth, the way she lived her life told her story. Man, we read she was humble, she was faithful, she was faith-filled. Despite the fact that her people and her background didn't recognize Yahweh as God, she chose to go with Naomi and follow his God. As she was noticed, Boaz says to her, I've heard about you, heard about the way you treated your mother-in-law after the death of her husband and how you left your father and mother and the land of your birth and have come to live among a bunch of total strangers. Now that's the Message paraphrase. I just like that. I've heard about you. And Ruth told her story through the way she lived her life. Her life told a story, and that story mattered. In fact, Ruth is honored and mentioned as part of the genealogy of Christ. And you've read that already in Matthew. But her story, so seemingly insignificant in the context of the people of Israel, became such an important part of the story of Israel. She lived faithful, she lived honoring, and her story mattered. Ruth's story mattered to God. The blind man's testimony mattered, and your story matters. Remember this and be encouraged that your life can be a story that tells of God's goodness. It's not just an insignificant story. It's a story that you can share that can change a life. All right, it's verse of the day time. Verse of the day time? Sounds like I'm saying like verse of the not nighttime. Verse of the day. It is time for verse of the day. Ruth chapter 1 verse 16 says this, but Ruth replied, do not urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Man, such a beautiful scripture. And fun fact, Harry and I spoke these in our wedding vows. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Ruth knew that she'd connected with a people group who held the keys to life, Yahweh, God. And she wasn't about to give that up. I love that. What a beautiful heart she carried. All right, well, that's it for the Daily Brew. Thank you so much for having me. I hope you're encouraged that your story matters and that it carries weight today. I want to share a personal challenge with you, a challenge for you. Is there someone in your life that you can share your story with today? Someone close to you who hasn't heard your testimony of coming to Jesus. Share it with someone today. Your story is powerful. Maybe a family member, maybe a work colleague. That's my personal challenge to you. See if you can today or in the coming days find someone who will listen to the story that Jesus has outworked in your life. But that's it. If it's the start of your day, have a wonderful day. And if it's the end of your day, good night, sleep tight, and we'll see you tomorrow for day 137 of the Daily Brew.